Thank you for joining us today. I'm Professor Ann Forsyth, and I want to begin by acknowledging that the Harvard Graduate School of Design is located on the traditional and ancestral land of Massachusetts. The original inhabitants of what is now known as Boston and Cambridge. We pay respect to the people of the Massachusetts tribe, past, present, and future, and honour the land itself, which remains sacred to the Massachusetts people. The school also recognises the work of the Harvard University Native American program in cultivating the relationships that led to the creation of this acknowledgement. A quick reminder that we have live captioning available tonight for our virtual audience. To enable captions, click the closed captioning button at the bottom of the live stream window. I also want to invite you to join us for a few upcoming GSD public programs. Most importantly, next Wednesday, November 1st, Angela Brooks, President of the American Planning Association, will give an evening lecture entitled No Place Like Home. And now for tonight's event. Welcome to the Jaqueline Tyrwhitt Urban Design Lecture, honouring the legacy of groundbreaking Professor Jaqueline Tyrwhitt, who worked to establish and fortify the urban design program during its founding years. Harvard University established the first formal North American program in urban design at the GSD in 1960, and a fund was created in 2010 to celebrate the program's 50th milestone year. The GSD is grateful for Alex Krieger, Moshe Safdie, Jay Chatterjee, and Lee Cott, who led the charge in fundraising for the lectureship. These four, along with countless others, helped endow the lectureship as an enduring part of the school's public program, bringing world-class practitioners in urban design to engage with the school through lectures and symposia. On a more personal note, this is the 100th year since there was a degree program in city planning at Harvard, starting as a concentration in landscape architecture before becoming a separate degree in 1929. In 1956, Jaqueline Tyrwhitt, a British town planner and editor, was wooed to Harvard, starting in planning and then helping establish the urban design program, where she taught until 1969. Tyrwhitt bridged planning and design through collaborations with many big thinkers, including Patrick Geddes, Jose Luis Sert, Siegfried Gideon, Martin Meyerson, and Konstantin Doxiadis. Tonight's speaker is in that tradition of bridging fields, and I welcome Professor Joan Busquets to the podium to provide the welcome to Mr. Manuel Salgado.
Thank you, Anne. The inaugural Jaqueline Tyrwhitt lecture was in 2022, after the COVID. It was given by Anne Lacaton, and she was centering on her transformative projects and correct use of ecological materials. Early this year, Adele Santos, with Narrative Map, a design process, offered an impressive discourse on the way designers can be involved in the solution of many different problems, finding the way to create a quite coherent space for them all. Today is my privilege to introduce a European architect, Manuel Salgado, here at the front, much of whose work is carried out in Portugal, and whose strategies and projects present a diverse perspective and approaches, like those of Jackie Tyrwhitt, managed to combine. Portugal is an Atlantic country that enjoys a Mediterranean climate and has experienced a major social and political transformation in the last 50 years, particularly the passage from the authoritarian regime of Salazar to the Carnation Revolution in 1974. I want to highlight how, in Portugal, architecture and urban design have often led to this social transformation, giving primary importance to the design of public space and the careful form of its architecture, but also with bold strategies in the design of the city and its parts, as Salgado is going to show us. In the wake of architects such as Nuno Portas, Fernando Tábora, another generation pops up and is clearly represented by two different schools, what I am going to call the Escola of Porto and the Escola of Lisbon. Both are very remarkable. Álvaro Cisa Vieira and Eduardo Soto de Moura are representative of the former, the School of Porto. But Gonçalo Birne, Carrillo de Graça, and Aires Mateu brothers, quite well known here at the GSD because been teaching here, both they are representative of the school, the Escola of Lisbon. Both schools have a great character, and doesn't seem to me that in pedagogy and practice they are dissociated, but they still are very different. But the funny thing is, one is in the north, Porto, as you know, and Lisbon in the south. Manuel Salgado is a Lisbon born and bred, but with big projects in the north, in Porto. Cisa Vieira is the soul of the Escola de Porto, but with seminal projects in Lisbon. I think that is very interesting in this situation that probably Manuel Salgado is going to explain. I'd like to draw your attention on his extensive career, but most of all on its variety, his urban architecture and the city making that he proposes for tonight is manifested in such different scales and contexts that is an encyclopedia of exercises of extraordinary coherence. I would like to highlight some introductory themes that perhaps will be interesting to discuss among us in the questions of answers that at the end of his intervention. First, I think he is going to present a transversal narrative of our discipline, showing how he can work in such different areas. Two, he proposes a position that is open to the collaboration with other agencies as a way to enrich the field of the work. And he is going to show a great ability to understand where the innovative value of the urban designer work lies at all times, and to concentrate his effort particularly in that place, in the innovative value. And the fourth theme, for me, is the ethical commitment of the urban designer to working with society. And that is what city making that he is proposing is going to explain us. With this brief introduction that I hope fits into the more general context of the GSD, please join me in welcoming Manuel Salgado to present the Jaqueline Tyrwhitt lecture this evening. Thank you.
So good afternoon, Professor Ann Forsyth, dear Professor Joan Busquets. Thank you very much for your invitation. I'm very honored to be here. I come from Portugal, and I was born in 1944 and graduated in architecture in 1968. This lecture, it's about city making. City making can be approached from different points of view and disciplines. Theoretical and global reflection or a sectoral approach to solve concrete problems. As a thinker and teacher, Jaqueline Tyrwhitt approached the subject from different angles: the regional framework, the landscape, and the architecture of the city. As an educator, she taught that the plan must respond to society needs and must not be a pattern imposed on it. Heritage and history of cities are the foundations for planning the future. The city maker's aspiration is to achieve harmony between the inhabitants and the physical and social cultural environment in which they live. These principles are the primary reasons for participatory planning, for the city rehabilitation policies, and for social and territorial cohesion and sustainability. In the 60s, 30% of the families in Lisbon lived in shacks or in buildings with very poor living conditions. After the regime change of 1974, to respond to available challenges, I work for municipalities and resident associations as a town planner, then as an architect in large-scale transformative projects, and finally as councillor of urbanism in Lisbon, making the city as a politician. Those were three different ways of participating in city making that have been interconnected on a journey of more than 50 years. Three different ways of approaching the same reality, sitting on different sides of the table, with the same social commitment, using the tools that my training as an architect has given me. The end of the colonial war led to the return of about 1 million citizens to Portugal, mainly from the former African colonies. If the housing situation was already critical, it became much more difficult with their return. Nuno Portas, an architect who had been my professor at university, was appointed Secretary of State of Urbanism and Housing. Architects were mobilized to intervene. The challenge was multifaceted. The shanty towns that would be substituted to build real houses, the informal settlements that need to be redesigned and to legalize mainly, and better living conditions in inland cities which had been deserted due to the immigration to the north of Europe, where needed to be created better living conditions. Portas led the foundation for a new housing policy based on the mobilization of population organized into resident committees and cooperatives. In the 10 years following the revolution, I was invited to support municipalities as a political urban designer. I worked closely with the populations and with elected representatives to provide the solutions that were possible at the time to solve specific problems. In Lisbon's industrial belt, we support the residents' committees to build real houses. We redesign illegal settlements where thousands of lower middle-class families lived without basic infrastructures or public facilities, legalizing urbanizations, enabling the construction of infrastructures, schools, and other collective facilities, with the direct involvement of the residents' associations and the municipalities. It was a technical and social mediator job. In the interior of the country, we made assessments regarding the needs for basic infrastructures and collective equipment to attract citizens. In Évora, we designed the first municipal plan made after the revolution. At the same time, Cisa Vieira, in an intense participatory process with future residents, was designing Malagueira, integrating illegal settlements, explore the patio house typology with a morphology based on big narrow long blocks like those in the historic city. He covered the territory with a mantle wisely adapted to the topography. The influence of Cisa while we were designing Évora plan was important. The teachings of Nuno Portas and our work as architects trying to reconcile interests and resolve often unsolvable conflicts helped to improve the legal framework for land use planning and introduce structural changes to housing policies and the way to make cities. The historical landmark in the site were the monastery of St. Mary of Belém, that's an old picture from the monastery, and the Tower of Belém, the first one from the 15th century, this one from the 16th century, and the Imperial Square and the monuments to the discovery from the 20th century, from the period of fascist. But to us architects, there was other constraints. The proximity to the Tagus River, the barrier of the heavy road, traffic road here, and the railroad in the south, a neighborhood in the west, and a hill, a little hill in the north. This was a large-scale project to enhance historical monuments and interlock the heterogeneous urban area. Vittorio Gregotti challenged me to team up with him. In April '88, he came to Lisbon to get a sense of the area. He brought a hand-drawn cardboard the size of a street ticket with a concept of what became the new cultural center. A facade perpendicular to the monastery, a line with the west top of this building, 5 interconnected modules, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The first one, it's a Congress Center, an opera house and a theater, a museum, and those are the modules that are already built, and 2 other modules that will be constructed in the future time. The parking lots are located here and there on the ground level to minimize excavation and create a new raised floor. The interplay of the volumes of the 5 modules of the original project, 2 modules still to be executed, establish a transition between the monumental environment of the monastery and a fragmented urban fabric to the west. More than 50 teams submit proposals to the competition. Several proposals of isolated buildings crossed by open-air spaces that define streets and squares. In contrast, our solution proposes a mega volume that occupies the entire site, from which pieces are removed to shape the open spaces. Playing with variations in planimetry and altimetry, the mega volume is crossed by path, and by path endorsed large open spaces. The interior space are shaped using a similar logic. It's like sculpting the interior and the exterior at the same time. Except for the tower in the opera house, the height of the volumes is aligned with the west wing of the monastery. The predominance of horizontal volumes, interrupted by a few openings in the outside facade, as well as the use of the same stone of the convent, attenuate the contrast between the new and the old without falling into a trap of limitation. On the other hand, the facade facing inwards are dominated by large glazed windows that establish an interior-exterior continuity, accentuating the public nature of the center. The sections of the building reveal the spatial richness of the interior and the exterior space. You can see on the first one, that's the ground level, and you go up there, it's the ground level, it's there, and down it's the museum, and then it's returned to the real ground level. And you can see all the big volumes inside and the connection and the space outside that are shaped as something that we took out of a big mega volume. The geometry of the project adopts a cubic model with 7.5 meter edge. This concept is very important because all the design, all the volumes, all the interior space, all the elements of the construction guarantee the same rule of dimensions. And only this rigid rule of dimension allows us to finish the project in a so short time, because we put many teams working together, different teams working together, and at the same time we allowed the construction to start when we are already designing the project. As you see here, all the modules are repeating. That's the museum, and also in the opera room, it's the same rule. The public space of the CCB, it's part of the town. The square, the museum, it's from both sides of the square and on the basement. The streets perpendicular to the river, and the raised garden that allow to have a view to the other side of the river and to protect from the noise of the traffic and the railway. Clarity and strategic options in the concept, accurate geometry and design urban discipline allow to mobilize a large architectural team, overlap design and construction, and conclude the work in time. Despite its large presence, the CCB interacts as an equal with the site's historical landmarks, introducing an order that don't exist before it was built. The CCB has achieved its goal of being a dynamic cultural hub and yet another monument in Belém. In 1992, the Expo’98 project was announced. The exhibition served as an opportunity for a large-scale urban regeneration as part of a major real estate operation that paid for the event. With the aim of rebalancing Lisbon, the exhibition was held in the eastern side of Lisbon, historically the poorest part of the city, home to working-class neighborhoods and polluting industries. So the center of Lisbon is here, the historical center. The east side of Lisbon, it's all that zone. It's the poorest zone of Lisbon. The master plan for the Expo site proposed a metropolitan centrality around the mobility interface. In 1994, we were commissioned to draw up the urban and streetscape design for the exhibition, as well as the detailed plan for the same area after the exhibition. The focus was on the post-Expo. Everything we designed had to be considered for integration into the future neighborhood. What was asked of us was a plan and a project that would evolve over time. A matrix on which authors, some immediately and others after the exhibition, will design the pavilion's projects, the commercial, office, and residential buildings. The matrix would be the design of the outdoor space. The public space during the Expo, it's very, very important because it's what remains as a memory of the exhibition. It was through the design rules of the open spaces that we could interact with the architects who designed the pavilions, and finally, we wanted the public space to be the distinctive element of the future central area. Before we started to design, almost everything on the site was demolished. The option was for an orthogonal grid, which defines mega blocks where thematic pavilions and the modular structures are implanted, knowing that after the exhibition, the few temporary constructions will be dismantled. Here, there, and there. Here it's maintained, this building. All this was demolished. And it's the commercial center that's maintained, and all those buildings, it's still there as part of the project final. The orthogonal grid was important to avoid the precinct becoming a labyrinth. The streetscape design introduced subliminal references that allow us to perceive distance to travel, directions to pursue, visual landmarks to reach. It's the Portugal Pavilion from Cisa Vieira. The Oceanário from Chermayev, and the Science Museum from Carrilho da Graça. In the floor project, the location of the buried infrastructures that rise to the surface, the design sidewalks, tree plantings, street lighting, and flagpoles all had a strict relative position. It's very important, that rule, because it's the only way that we can guarantee that everything will be in order in the short time also that we had to design and construct the Expo. The main objective of Expo '98 has been achieved. It's photographs taken now, so 20 years after the exhibition. A powerful transport interface, a wise mix and concentration of shops, office accommodations, restaurants, and leisure facilities generate the influx of people necessary for the site's vitality. The previously negative location became one of the most desirable spaces in Lisbon, thanks to its proximity to the river and the quality and density of the design. The eastern zone is no longer the poor and forgotten part of Lisbon. As soon as Expo '98 was over, I was invited to teach urban design. The next 8 years of my career will be dedicated to the university and the office. At university, with the students' imagination and freedom of thought, we studied Lisbon to see how to stick together some disconnected parts of the city, improve accessibility with soft modes of locomotion, and make the city more sustainable with a continuous grid structure. Meanwhile, at the office, we have carried out projects for various cities in Portugal and abroad. We have deepened the concept and methodology of urban project as a strategic open work in which various actors and authors intervene and in which the morphology and design of the public space is structural. The city of Oporto, we took advantage of the construction of a stadium to rehabilitate 48 hectares of a depressed area. The intervention was demanding. It had to be done in partnership between the landowners and the municipality through a legal mechanism of redistribution of costs and benefits. The legislation made it possible to transfer construction rights between plots, which gave us more freedom to design. The new stadium would be a multi-used facility with shops and service operating 7 days a week. Both in terms of location and its design, the stadium should be contribute to enhancing the new urban area. On the other hand, the operation was intended to improve accessibility, mitigate the effects of the nearby highway, and connect the surrounding neighborhoods. In addition to the urban design, it was necessary to set up a financial balanced operation. In this case, our contribution to making a city was not limited to the strict role of urban designer, but to managing an urban project. It was a difficult site with accentuated slope. Project this avenue to connect, this boulevard to connect to the stadium with a consolidated city. Now there are buildings on both sides. It's an old photography. The stadium, it's important. We had the intention to reduce the visual impact. So the stadium, it's open in both the public space. It's difficult. Also, all the work on the modulation of the soil. The stadium is open in both sides to reduce the visual impact. And we designed also the subway station and another pavilion connected to the stadium. So 7 years later, I had a portfolio of feasible proposals for Lisbon and the idea that it was possible to approach a city as a big-scale urban project. In 2007, the Lisbon City Council resigned, triggering midterm elections. I was invited to stand for elections for deputy mayor in charge of urbanism. I know Lisbon well, and I had a vision for the city, concrete ideas about what was needed and what could be done, so I thought it was worth the risk to exchange my architectural career for a political post. I coordinated an electoral program for urbanism with proposals to be implemented in the 2 years remaining until the end of the mandate and in the 4 years of the following mandate. Underpinning the program was a vision with 3 main axes. Lisbon as a metropolis in the global economy, based on the creative activities, tourism and leisure, a supportive city that works on the quality of life, the urban environment and culture and values the historic center and the river, and a governance model that values citizen participation, mobilize municipal service and city transformation agents. In practical terms, our activity will need to be implemented in 3 stages. First, the emergency room to pay off debts and get the service up and running. Second, the little big things that make people's life better. Third, to prepare for the future with projects for the medium and long term. I defend that the City Council had to lead the process of making city, abandoning the passive attitude it had adopted by adding the initiative over the private corporations. To achieve this goal, we needed a real cultural revolution in the way the municipal service interacts with the real estate agents. The executive adopted a direct relationship with citizens to identify the small things that with the few resources available could be achieved, launching an exercise of political co-decision. Listening to the people, we created decentralized chamber meetings and a participatory budget in which a percentage of the municipality's budget was allocated annually to a project proposed and voted on by the citizens. But concrete examples of what the little big things that make a difference were needed. The first thing is to the recovery of the city's viewpoint. With small works, we recover all the viewpoints of the city. The second one is the installation of kiosks and terraces. Then a small project on the riverbank, which marked the beginning of a major program to reconquer the riverfront. And an avenue profile was altered, removing 2 traffic lanes to widen the sidewalks, plant trees, and install Lisbon's first cycle path. 3 small examples that show the importance of remaking public space in favor of a more people-friendly, inclusive, and sustainable city that favors soft modes of locomotion. And so, the first 2 stages to which we had committed ourselves were fulfilled. The third stage was to prepare for the future. While developing general strategies for the city, detailed plans were drawn up for historic neighborhoods and brownfields for which new centralities were designed. That's important, the 7 goals, and also this last sentence, an urban plan conceived as a shared commitment among the parties involved in the transformation of the city. It was a big debate around the plan to mobilize all the transformative agents of the city. Anticipating the detailed plans allow us to inform the general plan and to test urban solutions, rules and parameters. The methodology, which was both top-down and bottom-up, had other advantage. It facilitated public debate on concrete issues and allowed us to have proposals for strategic areas within a short period of time. The plan needed to be flexible, programmatic, and operational, guiding real estate investments and prioritizing municipal investments. It could not be just a rigid and blind plan about what could and could not be done. Urban rehabilitation was a priority. The rent freeze imposed during the World War II lasted for more than 70 years, led to the lack of investment in buildings conservation and the devaluation of assets. At the beginning of the millennium, a large number of Lisbon's buildings were in ruin or vacant, with their owners expecting demolition and the possibility of constructing a new building. Writing in the plan that buildings in the consolidated city could only be restored was ineffective. Most were privately owned, and the landlords lacked capital due to the low rents. At the same time, the municipality did not have the resources to replace the landlords. To unblock the situation, it was necessary to design a strategy with several incentives for rehabilitation. The strategy was clear. If the municipality rehabilitates the public space and the collective facilities, it will enhance the value of the land. This would make the rehabilitation of buildings more attractive. This clarification of the role of the various actors with effective financial and non-financial incentives generate a wave of investment throughout Lisbon. Nevertheless, rehabilitating the historical buildings of an old city is not an easy task. Some people only accept the full refurbishment, while others defend adapting buildings to current comfort and safety demands. That's an example of a very good intervention in the main avenue of Lisbon from Joan Luís Carrilho da Graça. While planning the whole city, we felt that it was justified to prioritize some specific areas. 3 cases are good examples of this strategy: the riverfront, the historic center, and the Muslim neighborhood. At the end of 2007, we initiated conversations with the government to transfer the inactive port areas to the City Hall jurisdiction. In 2008, the City Hall approved a plan for the 18-kilometer riverfront. To regain the waterfront, it wasn't enough to transfer jurisdiction to the City Council. It was necessary to overcome the barrier of the heavy traffic routes that has been built over the last 150 years. The topography of Lisbon, it's a very peculiar one. It's in a theater turned to the river with 7 hills, and so the easiest place to make connections between the east and the west, it's running a road near the border of the river, and also the connections to the interior. So till 2008, that's the situation. All the connections cross the center to go to north or to go east and west. So what we need to do is exactly to do this. It's to cut the connections here, or to reduce the connections here, and to use new connections to go to that area that it's the large historic center of Lisbon. Over the next 10 years, various projects took place that allow us to reclaim the long riverbank areas for the use of Lisboners. That's near Expo, in the east side of Lisbon. Then the new cruise ship terminal, also by Carrilho da Graça, near the center. A new area near the center also, that's from the west of the center, Caixo Sodré. That's it's an interface of transports. We use the investment in the interface of transports to pay all this transformation, and a museum for project from Amanda Levitt in the west side of Lisbon. Then in the historic center, in 1755, there was a huge earthquake in Lisbon, and 2 years after the earthquake, a project designed by the Portuguese military engineers for the reconstruction of the center was approved. It's a very original plan. It uses all the experience that the Portuguese military engineers from construction in the former colonies. It's a very rational, illuminist design with a very clear morphology, with a special typology of buildings, with a resistance to earthquakes. It's the first experience of a very special structure in wood, and with an innovation in urban design. It's a system of, I don't know if you say perequation or transfer of rights of construction between landowners. And another thing much more difficult at the time, it's to move the position of all the church that exist in the center. In 1988, a major fire destroyed an important part of the historic center. Cisa Vieira was in charge of the reconstruction project, which became an example of how to intervene as a contemporary architect in a historical city. In 2007, we launched a strategic program. The aim was to rebuild a new centrality appropriate to the exceptional urban and architectural value, adding new activities in the creative and knowledge industries, tourism and leisure, and attracting new residents. A safeguard plan for heritage rehabilitation, recovering the direct links between the monumental square and the river, was drawn up. It was the plan imposed to maintain completely the morphology of the blocks from the original plan. We studied the connections between the river and the urban fabric, and also we introduced some rules to redesign mainly the ground floor that it was transformed by commerce and don't respect the old plan. Safeguard plan, yes, recovering the direct link between the monument and to aim to mobilize real estate investment in buildings for housing, commerce, and tourism. But in order to improve living conditions by reducing air pollution and noise, it was essential to reduce the amount of car traffic that crossed the city center. So, important to remove cars. To do this, the main road that ran between the monumental square and the riverbank had to be cut. With some astute thinking, we carried out work on a large sewage system which conveniently cut off traffic temporarily and diverted it to other routes. By the time the work was finished, people had got used to the other routes, and the square had a new layout with a direct connection to the riverbank. A system of pedestrian paths assisted by elevators and escalators connect the both hills, Chiado on one side and the castle the other, connect with the subway. 2 museums was installed, and also the first startup in Lisbon was installed also in Baixa. And a new garden near home and a school also to attract residents. Moraria, it's a neighborhood of Muslim origin, always a place of coexistence of different religions and ethnicities, with more than 60 nationalities in the community. With an aging population living in poorly maintained rented houses, Moraria was an unsafe place and a haven for clandestine activities such as prostitution, drug selling, and consumption. In 2012, associations of residents organized themselves and compete to a participatory budget, winning a contribution of 1 million euros for a community program. They proposed to create facilities for elderly and young people, to support local employment initiatives, and to launch recovery programs for drug addicts and former sex workers. To show his unconditional support and make the area safer, the mayor moved his office inside the neighborhood. Install his office here. The municipality rehabilitated the squares, the public space, the streets, and built the social facilities. It's a very special social facility, this one. It's Casa da Severa. Severa was a singer of Fado. Fado, it's the national song, and it's now it's heritage from UNESCO. And Severa was a singer from the beginning of the century, of the last century, and it's very important, the culture, to mobilize and to create community connections. I was deputy mayor from 2007 to 2019. During those years, the political, economic, and social environment changed significantly. Following the subprime and sovereign debt crisis of 2008-2009, Portugal went in bankruptcy. The economic and social consequences of the measures imposed to rescue the country's finances were violently felt. The reduction of salaries and pensions and the increase in taxes and the cost of public service led to widespread impoverishment. A new law liberalizing urban renting generated a wave of evictions. A large proportion of Lisbon residents were experiencing great difficulties at risk of losing their jobs and their homes. Therefore, from 2011 onwards, the priority shifts to housing and economy. In the economy, there was a new focus on tourism. More tourists meant job creation in hotels and accommodations, but also in retail and catering and indirectly in construction. The establishment of short-term accommodations and hotels required the renovation of buildings, which boosted the construction sector. At the same time, a counter-cycle policy was implemented. The municipality launched a large-scale intervention that led to the rehabilitation of many schools, housing, historical gardens, and public spaces throughout the city. This initiative created opportunities for small and medium construction companies that emerged from the bankruptcy of the bigger construction companies in the wake of the 2009 crisis. Those small works and the requalification of the riverfront made Lisbon more sustainable and improved social cohesion, and at the same time made the city more attractive. In 2014, the prestigious prize award to the city promoted it to a high level in the international tourism market and more appealing to foreign investment. After 2014-2015, the downside of this success was the fact that many buildings in the historic districts were purchased and renovated for hotels, short rent, and luxury apartments. The exponential increase in demand for rehabilitated buildings for affluent foreigners subtract dwellings from the housing stock and inflates housing costs, expelling not only the poorest, but also the middle-class residents of the city. Gentrification is the result of globalization. With the rehabilitation of the historic city and the riverfront in full swing, we were able to shift our focus to the execution of the plan. We focus on social and territorial cohesion, the increase of sustainability, climate change mitigation, and the redistribution of activities in the city. Central to all these themes is the issue of mobility in Lisbon's relationship with a wider city and within the boundaries of the municipality itself. Every day, more commuters enter Lisbon than permanent residents, and private vehicles dominate over public transport. This is why there is an urgent need to increase the percentage of journeys on public transport, encourage soft modes, and discourage the use of individual transportation. It was necessary to redesign the public space and to relocate affordable housing units and employment hubs. This redesign increased sidewalks, bus and cycle lanes, reduced the capacity of parking space for non-residents, and the speed of traffic on major roads. This reformulation of public space freed up areas for people to use and transformed terraced areas into permeable soil. The location of the new centralities near public transport, namely the trains and subways, aimed to reduce the influx of commuters' cars, mitigating the traffic congestion and improving the quality of the urban environment. To reinforce social cohesion, we propose the construction of public facilities such as schools, libraries, and health centers. The project one square in each neighborhood, the distribution of affordable housing units in the city, and the connection of the integration of forgotten urban settlements. It's a 3D, but it's already constructed. Focusing on environmental sustainability, measures were taken to increase soil permeability, to add more public green spaces, and to connect the green corridors. And the new centralities near trains and subway stations. That's also a project from Cisa Vieira and Eduardo Sotomora, for another architect from Oporto. All those projects was done in all the new centralities near railway stations and the metro. Putting all these projects into action led to public debates, long negotiations for financing and establish partnerships, elaborating and approving various studies and projects. Creating the conditions for these large-scale interventions was my last contribution as city councillor. It is currently under construction. I went to the city council with the idea of staying as a deputy mayor for 6 years. I ended up staying for 12. It was a very different job from what I imagined when I graduated in architecture. But it was also a job where I drew on a lot of the experience I had gained throughout my life. The plans carried out in the hot years of the revolution initiate me into participatory planning. I concluded that the plans are useful only when they are feasible, so making them operational should be a concern. With Gregotti, I deepened my reading of the geographic, physical, and social cultural environment. With the Expo '98, I realized the effective importance of public space in the construction of an inclusive city. Oporto taught me the importance of specific buildings and infrastructures as magnets or catalysts of urban plan. At university, with the students' creativity, we explored new possibilities and proposals because cities always need to be reinvented. In the 12 years that I was in the Lisbon City Council, I learned that planning and deciding in a context of uncertainty demands a vision and clear objectives, flexible plans and adaptive strategies, the ability to innovate and take risks, being open to suggestions and looking out for opportunities, balancing interests and negotiating trade-offs in favor to the municipality, using incentives and tax policies to encourage or penalize private behaviors. And then the years at the City Council also taught me that the city is like a game board with several players. A decision in favor of someone almost always has a reverse effect that penalizes others. And decisions taken in a certain context might have not only the desired results, but also the negative consequence in the long term. This at the City Council also taught me that the city is like I was asked many times if I missed design. To this, I answered that I did in fact still design through the hands of the others. Or, as Nuno Portas said, the institution also designed. I was born in Lisbon, studied in Lisbon, and have always lived in Lisbon. I have known several Lisbons. The grey one from the dictatorship, the explosive one from the revolution, the proud one from the Expo '98, the sad one from the IMF bailout, the deserted one from the pandemic, and the cosmopolitan one from the global economy. The cities are people and the stones. The stones alone do not make the city, but they help. I think I help making a happier city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manuel. I think it was extraordinary the itinerary through so many projects. I think that I'm sure that will be questions that now we, if you don't mind, we are open to have some questions to your presentation or more general reference into that. I think that's okay, very good. Here, anybody that likes to start? Yeah, please.
Magnificent presentation, thank you. Over those many decades, any regrets or any risks that you took that backfired or that you, any decisions? Thanks for the presentation. Any the magnificent work of those decades, or any regrets or decisions or risks that you took that backfired, or you're concerned about the longer term implications, didn't quite work out the way you wanted?
Of course, many things. When we say that a city has like a game board, and there are always someone that are not beneficiated by the decisions, sometime after, we see that perhaps the decisions need to be different. By instance, what's happened in all this process of rehabilitation of the historic districts, it's revealed exactly that situation, because at the moment perhaps it was possible to buy some buildings and to use it for affordable housing, and we don't did it, and so now we think that it was a wrong decision at the moment. At the moment, it was absolutely essential to try to maintain employment. And to maintain employment, it's important to support the small construction enterprises and to create conditions for rehabilitation, not promoted by the municipality because we don't have money, but by the landowners. Now, I think that perhaps if we could at the time to buy some buildings and not to allow that so many buildings will transform in tourist apartments, it will be much better.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm curious how you won public support for removing traffic lanes and what the opposition was to it in the moment.
We had a team of traffic engineers working with us, and they said that it is possible to reduce, if you reduce the traffic lanes, we decrease the velocity, the speed. And decreasing the speed, sometimes we can maintain the same quantity of traffic moving, but with less speed, and so we can recuperate areas to other use, or to planting, or to enlarge sidewalks, or. But it's work done with traffic engineers.
Yeah.
Not many architects become council members or deputy mayors, but a few have. And I wonder what you really learnt as an architect from your time as a politician, and how you think we could educate people to take up that role.
It's true in Lisbon, for more than 1 century, that there are not deputy mayor on urbanism architect. So it's not only on it's
now they are coming.
they are coming, I hope so. But I think that when we learn to be architects, we have a culture, and at the same time we have a way of thinking that's important to make synthesis and to take decisions. And before going to the municipality, one of the reasons that I accept to go to the municipality, it's when I work with municipalities, many times I see that politicians don't decide because they don't know exactly all the complexity of the decision, neither the effects that the decision can have. And I think that the capacity that our studies in architecture will give us as a tool, it's the capacity exactly of making to enlarge the analysis of a big quantity of information and to know how to make the synthesis and then to take decisions.
Thank you. Alex?
I think at the end of your presentation, you mentioned that cities have to transform, they have to change. I think a lot of us in this room feel that way, and we spend a lot of our time and energy doing so to make sure that that is a possibility. In your policy life, I'm sure you encounter people who feel vehemently that the cities shouldn't change. In fact, they should stay the same. So I'm curious what sort of mechanisms or techniques or strategies you use to interact with, collaborate with, and hopefully kind of work together with people who feel differently about urban conditions.
La gente no quiere normalmente que cambies nada porque está bien o están acostumbrados. Por tanto, ¿qué estrategia utilizaron para conseguir hacer estos cambios?
It's true what you say. It's absolutely true, and it's also true in Lisbon. But sometimes you need to choose the right partner to make the transformation. For instance, the association of cyclistas, the cycling association, it's very important to fight to install the bike lanes in Lisbon and to impose the reduction of traffic lanes. People on the neighborhoods defend this program, a square in each neighborhood, because it's a way to create a community. And they don't want the cars that the people that come from out of Lisbon to go there, and they prefer to have his own square where they can meet all together and where the children can play. And so it's important to know exactly who can be your aliado, your allied to make your partner to make the transformation.
Questions, please.
Hi. I'm wondering, well, several questions. One is, how did you establish 21.5 square meters as your modulus? And then could you just explain a bit more about your urban centralities, you know, the 4 nodes that you establish and how you associate them to the rest of the city. And then if you could explain what happened after COVID and how the city has reemerged in its economics. Has it really leaned towards tourism, or has it returned towards, the human nature of the city itself without globalism? Because globalism is being broken right now.
¿Cómo se puedes explicar algo más?
Mm-hmm. So
the first question was.
It was actually the 7.5 meters.
Right. ¿Por qué el módulo de la construcción en 7 metros y medio? ¿Sí?
Okay.
Se explica que es un proyecto bastante viejo y tiene muchos años.
Okay.
Explica que es un proyecto viejo.
¿Cuál?
El del Belém.
Ah, sí. Belém, it's we designed Belém 28 years ago. 28, 29. And how do you arrive to the
module
7.5 module? So it's very curious. 7.5. We need to start with the foundations. To cravar estacas, to put the
piles.
Yeah, to put the piles. And we need, in a very short time, to give to the contractor the position of the piles. And so we decide, as we have parking lots in both sides of the complex, we decide 7.5 meters a square, 700, to design the parking. And then we say, well, if we have 7.5 meters here, we'll have 7.5 meters in height. So you have a cubic. And then we decide to divide the 7.5 meters by 8. And we arrive to 0.93, I don't know. And if we divide 0.93 by 3, we have a step or we have the height of the stair, and we have the plane of the stair. Or we have the height to put the hands like this. And so we discovered that we can have a module with sub-multiples or multiples with which we can organize all the space. In a certain moment, there are some guys working in the office that use a sheet of paper like this, not a meter, but a scale, and they say the model is this, and they design everything with this model. It was really a way to have always the same criteria by all the team. Everybody know exactly if you need to design that piece and then the ceiling and to show exactly the height. It's not 3 point, I don't know, something, but it's exactly something that you can see. It must be there. It's a very it was a very curious method of design, a discipline, very rigid, that allows to put an enormous team designing all together. At the same time, it allowed the contractor to start to build all the building, and we are still working on the ceilings, on the interiors, and to finish the design. You put also a question about the centralities. As I explained, in Lisbon we have 500,000 residents, and each day we have more than 500,000 commuters enter in the city. And public transports are really, they don't work. They work very badly, and they lost passengers. And so the decision is to place these new centralities, or new office, mainly office and commerce shops, near the railway stations and connected with the subway. And we conclude that people that live out of Lisbon, they arrive to those new centralities very quickly, and we reduce really the number of cars enter on the city. That's really a strategic decision that has been taken, and we used brownfields to work with, one it belongs to the metro company, and so it's a public company and we can work with them and to build there. Another one, it's a private company with a big plot near Gare do Oriente, near Expo, and so where we have also a railway station. So it's a work done like this. Partnership, mainly they are private investment, but with a real negotiation between the municipality and the promoters to develop those centralities in those places. And you demand also about the last question about COVID. Really, during COVID, the city stopped completely. But after COVID, it's incredible the quantity of tourists that come to Lisbon. And I don't know exactly the numbers, but I remember that 22, Portugal, it's one of the countries in Europe that have a bigger increase of tourism, and it's really what supports the development of the economy in the last 2 years. Of course, the tourism at the present moment, it's really, we have a really big housing crisis in Lisbon. It's really a huge problem. In the last decade, new buildings in Lisbon are few. There are no construction in Lisbon. In 2014, the municipality decided to start with this program of affordable housing, but it takes a lot of time to put all this in construction. We had problems with the Tribunal de Contas, how do you say Tribunal de Contas? The control, yeah. The tax control. And they don't accept the system that we propose. It's a partnership between the municipality and private. The municipality has an advantage. During the fascist period, there was a minister of public works at the time of Salazar that expropriates a third of the east part of Lisbon. So an enormous quantity of land, enormous. And we are using that land since that time to build a public house. It's public land, and what we try now is to establish partnerships with private enterprises, with real estate operators. We give the land with certain conditions, and they build affordable housing. It's a program that it's now in construction.
Good. I think if there are no more questions, I think I'd like to stress as the final conclusion, if may I say that, well, if you allow me to say, this idea that Manuel is presenting how an urban designer, I think it's an architect, but doing the practice in planning, an urban designer and also in terms of the public space, we can say the landscape as well, and being able to understand that the fact of making the city needs also to take also a lot of dimensions into consideration. As you mentioned, the laws, also the budget, the negotiation with the private, the way that the things can be implemented. I think that is something that we learn, and probably as a school we have to take more and more into consideration. But in all these different places that he's been seated around the table, he is always saying to us that always design counts. And the way that the design is done is completely different. What you did when you did this gigantic building with Gregotti, with the modular system, or when you were preparing the schemes and then Cisa Vieira popped up with the Malagueira. I mean, all these type of things, in a way, design means different tools that we have to be prepared. But I think this is very important, that the design is not something that is in itself, that has the value in itself. It's only valuable if it is able to be realized and to be developed. And for that, I think we have to be ready to understand a little bit about the economy, a little bit about the laws, a little bit about many other things, and that probably is the reason that probably also here at the GSD we are paying attention also to so many different disciplines, considering that what is the GSD is Graduate School of Design. And I think this is what is I like very much to stress here. But thank you very much for your fantastic presentation.